Hi, this is Buzz Moyer. I was a B camera steadicam operator on West Side Story.
My name is Mitch Dubin. I was the A camera operator on West Side Story.
And this is a Go Creative show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with John Buzz Moyer and Mitch Dubin, camera operators on West Side Story. And guys, I am so excited to have you on the show today because, first of all, I love talking to camera operators. And Mitch, we've had you on before for this very subject. But to have two of you on talking about such a huge film, it's going to be a lot of fun. So first of all, welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Now, there's a ton to talk about. Before we get there very quickly, I want to mention our sponsor today, MZ, empowering filmmakers, and of course, encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcast app, as well as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. So I want to introduce you both to our audience just to make sure everyone knows kind of how you work together in your roles on the film. So Mitch, tell us, what was your role on West Side Story?
I've done now 18 movies with Steven Spielberg as his A camera operator. And, being the A camera operator, it involves a lot of responsibilities other than panning and tilting the camera. You sort of keep the set moving, you're organizing, you're coordinating, collaborating with the grip department, the electric department, the sound department, the camera assistants. And there's a lot that goes into being a camera operator, which I'm sure Buzz will talk about as well. And the difference between A and B camera operator. On this show, because it was a musical and it was, there was a lot of great steadicam that Buzz did. I feel like we sort of both participated as, A camera operators. Yeah. But,
And Buzz, what was your role on the film?
Yeah, I was the B camera steadicam operator. Most of the dance sequences, Mitch was on a techno crane with a lever head, so he was off operating remotely. And I was.
I'm going to step in, but I just have to correct you real quick because I made the same mistake. It's actually a Scorpio crane, which we should get for our equipment technical.
Yes, people. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you guys have sponsorships? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, it's Monster Remotes. Yeah,
exactly.
That's right. Yeah. So it was okay. So Mitch was on a telescopic crane with a lever head, a stabilized head, pretty much off the dancing. And if I was doing B camera, I'd be off either under the crane, off, kind of out of the way, longer lens, picking off some things like that. And so basically, Mitch as the A camera is showing most of the process and being wide, and I'm trying to pick off moments of expressions or things like that. And sometimes with the Steadicam, I'd be out underneath the crane, moving laterally or in through, or his shot would be not very good for an intro, or I'd be in his shot and have to pull back with the actors or the dancers, and then his shot would work as well as mine at the same time, just to get as much information on two cameras as possible.
But I would say also, Buzz, and you could maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but Steven Spielberg tends to really like shooting one camera at a time. He's not a big multiple camera director. Now, obviously, on some of the big dance numbers, we did multiple cameras, you and I together. But on the dramatic sequences, it was really, he focuses one camera. So, most of the time it would be a camera, but sometimes it would be a Steadicam scene. And that's why I say that, at times Buzz was, operating like he was the A camera operator as well.
I want to talk about the techniques that you guys employed for filming a musical. First of all, have either of you worked on a musical of this scale before? No.
I've never.
Getting no's from
ever.
Mitch. Buzz, have you done any musical work before?
I did. I did a thing called Step Up 3D, which technically was a lot of dancing. And I did some additional photography on In the Heights. And not to go on about this too much, but as a child, I was a dancer. So I kind of understand the whole this kind of whole thing about dancing. If someone says 5, 6, 7, 8, I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Pay attention.
Well, did you feel like your experience as a dancer helped you in this role? Like, is there kind of did you feel there was a benefit to having those skills?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Watching them go through a rehearsal, if it was very difficult, where the actors are hitting different marks, and you have to kind of be ahead of that with a camera. If you're behind it, you've missed it. You have to be ahead of it to know where eventually they're gonna end up, so that you're there waiting for that moment. So, having that experience certainly was. Yeah, it was. I was very lucky to have that experience. It definitely gave me an advantage. Yeah.
Mitch, how do you treat a film like West Side Story, that's a musical, in being your first one? How is it different for you? What were maybe some of the kind of aha moments you had when you got on set and you're like, oh, I guess we're doing things a little differently now?
Well, there really are, I think, like a different set of rules for doing a musical. I mean, one really obvious rule is that, when you're showing dancers dancing, you don't cut off their feet. I mean, that's pretty basic, but it's not something that when you're doing a dramatic narrative scene that you always think about. You try to make frames clean, and, there's certain traditions of where you frame people, but, sometimes you don't, it's something else is more important. You might cut off their feet, but in dancing, that's like the ultimate sin. Sometimes after a take, I would get a note, Mitch, you cut off their feet. And so we'd have to do it again. But the thing that as Buzz was referring to, everything is so motivated by the music. And normally we're camera operators. We find our motivation visually. We're looking at something, even if it might mean we keep our, left eye open while your right eye's to the eyepiece. But doing dance and a musical, they're so athletic, these dancers, and I would get instructions from Stephen, like on that downbeat of the fourth verse or the fifth stanza, Mitch, whip over to this leaping dancer. And first of all, I didn't know what that meant. That's the one problem. But when I finally understood what it meant.
Wait, what did you not understand? The term, musical terminology?
The musical terminology.
Okay.
Buzz is a musician and a dancer, as he says. But for me, I understand music and beats and everything, but the terminology sometimes would be, like in a recording studio. I didn't really understand it, but that didn't take too long to figure out. But still, my instinct was always, okay, it's the downbeat on the fifth verse, whatever. I'm just going to watch. I'll keep my eye open and watch for that dancer leaping. And whenever I tried to do that, inevitably I was always late because, like I said, these dancers are so athletic. If I jump in the air, I'm going to bend my legs and I'm going to wind up and I'm going to jump. With dancers, you're looking at them, and 1 minute they're standing on the ground, and the next instant they're in the air. They don't do anything; they just fly. So, I needed sometimes to have somebody tap me on the shoulder when that was coming up, or otherwise just understand the music well enough that I knew on this beat I had to get over there to this dancer. But it was different. It was musically motivated, not visually motivated.
Buzz, did you feel like you were able to anticipate those moments maybe better just because you had a sense of movement from these dancers?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to say. If I had not had that experience, I don't know if I could have or not. I was, because I did have that. I did have that background and that experience. So I would have to say that it did help. It was an advantage to know, the beats and the things. And we had headsets, and sometimes I would ask for click track just to know when I could count the clicks because the dancers are based on whatever those steps are. So the clicks could also motivate to say, okay, and I'm going to pan now. And, so you'd have you used to have a syllabus, for lack of a better word, to go by for each take,
I want to talk about framing for a musical because, like you mentioned, Mitch, you can't cut off their feet. So I imagine that you are now stuck with wider lenses than maybe you would have done. You don't necessarily have the the focus or lack thereof that you would want to. And you kind of have to be wide. Everything has to be in focus for a lot of this. How do you kind of adapt your own maybe sensibilities or styles to now work within these kinds of confounds?
Well, certainly, on some of the really big dance numbers, like in the gym, the school gym, and in the street for the end of America, those are huge shots. I mean, they're just like old-fashioned Hollywood big shots. And they're fun to do because they're just so beautiful and big, and the production value. When it was smaller numbers, the way Steven works is the camera is choreographed so that it's moving, and it sometimes it's invisible, but you might be wide to see their feet, but at some point in the choreography of the dancers, the camera moves in to medium shots or even a close-up just to understand the emotion of what the scene is. It's not just the dance. And then maybe pull out again to see the finale and the wideness and the beauty of the dance. So, on some level, it wasn't any different than another Spielberg film. The camera's always moving from wide to medium to tight to wide again. And the only difference was it was musically motivated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Buzz, I guess similar question, knowing, I mean, especially when you're operating Steadicam, you're likely on a wider lens anyway, but did your approach to the big musical numbers change in any way because of the fact that, you're shooting dancers?
Again, as Mitch said, you want to show the feet to the head, and I don't think that it changed. I think you're still framing the shot to get all the information in that is possible with whatever lens has been chosen, and to also do it effectively and without running into anybody, because people are running at me, running away from me. So that was also kind of a thing, or tripping and falling down. But I really don't think. Nothing was adjusted. The shot was the shot, and that we're required to do that, and hopefully we do it as best that we can, and everyone's happy with it. So, yeah.
As camera operators on West Side Story, are you more involved in rehearsals for a musical than you would be for just a traditional drama film? Just a regular film is what we'll call them.
Not really. I mean, they rehearsed, the dancers rehearsed, with Justin Peck, the choreographer, and Steven, I'm sure as well, for months and months before we started shooting. And we weren't a part of that.
So as a result, were you able to make adjustments, or were you basically just shown the scene, shown the dance, and it was up to both of you to figure out the way to approach it?
Well, one of the other issues is just the physicalness of the dancers, of their exertion. I mean, one of the numbers, I guess it was the American number, right? But it was really, really hot in New York that summer. And Janusz also with his big lights. I mean, seriously, some of the actors, they would be tanned from the light, the intensity of the light.
Wow.
And Ariana, has said that her shoes melted on the streets in the New York. It was hot and very physical. So you can't do very many takes. You can't ask them to rehearse and then think about it and say, okay, we're ready. It's sort of like you see it. You sort of, you're given sort of basic instructions of what Steven wants, and they go action and you have to perform like the dancers do.
Yeah, it was impressive to see those dancers out there, full costumes, wearing. I'm sure they were rayon. I don't know if there's a lot of cotton involved in that, but It was hot. It was very hot, and I think at one day, as Mitch referred to, I counted about 300,000 watts of light just surrounding everything. Which was hot. Certainly with the Steadicam being out there running around. It wasn't for one of our camera trainees. He would every time I'd put the Steadicam down, he'd be there with the water and just shove it in my face. And you have to drink. So because someone took a picture of me. I was standing in front of a giant Ritter fan, which they just fired them up between takes. And I was dumping these bottles of water over me, the vest on, just standing there trying to get cool. It was so hot. Oh my gosh, it was hot.
But can you imagine the dancers? I mean, they were in full wardrobe and high heels, and
yeah,
it's crazy.
It was impressive to watch. It was certainly impressive to watch. Yeah, really.
I want to talk about the overall look of the film. Something I noticed throughout almost its entirety is this intense backlight, or sometimes even sidelight, that is sort of depicting the sun. And it's in all of the exterior scenes, but it's very bright, it's very hot, it's sharp, and it almost has like a glisten to it. And it's something that carries through the entire film. And I'd love to talk to you about and I know neither of you were the directors of photography necessarily, but I hope you can speak to that decision and how it was achieved. And Mitch, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, Janos is a very gifted cinematographer, and he's in lots of ways. This film was shot old school, which is not soft light, hard light, backlight, flares. We shot with anamorphic lenses and old school, I think C-series anamorphic lenses, if I'm correct, and anamorphic lenses flare. That's what they do. It's one of the reasons why people like to use them. I question, I don't know, I'd have to talk to a visual effects supervisor, but whether some of the flares were added visual effect wise, but the lenses flare anyway. And, but yeah, I mean, I think Janos wanted to have the film look and be lit as if we were in that time period, which is how those movies looked.
Yeah.
And Janos always uses backlight, heavy backlight. In fact, it's always a problem for us as camera operators to, try to keep the lights out of the frame. And oftentimes Janos will say, don't worry, just shoot the light because it's just going to flare out and be a big flare backlight.
So he was embracing it. He's encouraging it.
Yeah. Yes.
And you're right. I do notice that it does have that kind of vintage, old school Hollywood look, even though it's contemporary in a lot of ways too. And that backlight is certainly one of the things that lends to it. But is there anything else, Buzz, that was done by way of camera choices, lens choices, even camera movement, perhaps, that sort of gives it that kind of classic Hollywood feel?
I think just once you're in it and you're shooting it and you're kind of getting just the period costumes, the production value, seeing for blocks and blocks and blocks of, 2 blocks away, there's a delivery man pulling, newspapers out of a truck or something like that. So, you almost, if you did one pass, okay, and you were in a certain place where, I stood up physically in some place where I could see a certain amount of things. But then if I noticed something in the background in the distance, maybe I would hint a little to the left or the right to kind of hopefully help have more production value, or, help to surround the story and the dancers with all of that information, which it just makes the show even bigger. As I watch the movie, I've seen it 3 times, and the third time I would kind of see what's going, but then I'd look around and see just how big these shots were. Just so epic. Mitch would go up in the crane and you just see so far it was just monumental. It was really fun to be a part of.
That is like the old Hollywood part, of making movies.
The bigness of it.
I would make one note that I would say that makes this version of West Side Story less classical, and is in the sense of the camera movement. Because if you look at the original 1960s version of West Side Story, which is wonderful as it was, and everybody holds it dear to their heart, the camera is really static. I mean, it looks like other than the first number, it looks like they're filming a Broadway musical on stage, very proscenium. And what we did, what Stephen inspired us to do is the camera is incredibly dynamic, and it's in your face, and it's much more active. And I don't think even if they had wanted to do that in the 60s, they could have, because the equipment that we have now, steadicam, telescoping cranes, stabilized heads, drones, all these things are tools that are available to us now that they didn't have in the 60s. But that's I think a big difference that sort of separates the current film from the historical one in the 60s.
Yeah. Let's talk about the gear, camera, lenses, for West Side Story. First and foremost, what did you shoot on?
Film. Panavision.
Thought so. Yeah. It seems like Steven would just demand it, and he certainly has the clout to demand it.
Yeah, he will. I don't think Steven will ever shoot anything in digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, we shot film. Now, I'm going to preface this, and Buzz, you can disagree if you'd like, but as camera operators, and maybe we'll disappoint some of your listeners, but we're really not very technical. Honestly, I don't know what lenses we use other than that they were anamorphic. I know we use Panavision cameras. But our concern is the four lines of the frame, and whatever it takes for me to see those four lines of the frame is really all my concern is, So we're not going to be big technical.
I'll get as a Steadicam operator. I've been doing it for quite some time. And when I started, there were only 2 models to choose from, and they broke all the time. So my technical comes from just fixing the dang thing when it didn't work, pulling it out of the case. But I still use a relatively old arm. I did not have these augmented horizon devices now with this thing called a volt and a wave. I used that wave for one shot in the it was in the movie. That was it, and everything else is just old school. I find that with film, because of the motors running in the magazine and the film camera, it actually works as kind of like a gyro. It wants to stay straight and not yaw as much as these heat sinks, which are video cameras now. But we really, as far as technical things, the lenses and things like that, as long as I can see through it and I can find an image with that, that's what it comes down to. But
in terms of lenses, everybody will ask about lens, and because working in digital too, all the sensors are different sizes, and film is certainly a defined size. But so a 27 millimeter lens in anamorphic obviously looks different than a spherical 27, and depending on what camera you're putting it on, it's going to look different. So in a way, it's like you just get used to the language of the set of lenses that you have, and it's almost like every movie, it seems like it's a different language. So you just understand the translation of the language you're speaking to the millimeter of lenses that are in the lens box. But I do have one technical thing that I would like to share, because we did one thing that was interesting that I had never done before, which is we use as our stabilized head a Libra head, and the Libra controller built into it, they have these motion sensors, and our Libra tech figured out a system where I could take the controller, which normally lies horizontally and the wheels are connected to it, and turn it on its side, put 2 handles on it and an eyepiece, and I could actually put this controller on my shoulder, and I could actually do handheld work on a remote stabilized head that's maybe 50 feet in the air.
That's cool.
It was really interesting, because Steven likes handheld, and when it's necessary or when it's appropriate, but it was wonderful to be able to do handheld on, like I said, on a big sweeping Technicrane or Scorpio crane, telescoping crane, up in the air, down, pushing in, pulling out. It added another bit of excitement that I had never done before.
How are you controlling it?
On my shoulder.
Just so
literally. It's the controller that I normally have the wheels attached to, but inside of it there are sensors. So when you move that controller up like this, like the head will move that same way.
Oh, cool. So the head of the camera is mimicking your motion by way of like a sensor vest or something like that. Is that?
The sensors are actually in the controller of the Libre head. That the same controller that uses the wheels to control the pan, tilt, roll. You can take that, hit a couple switches to change its mode, and I could put it on my shoulder, and it would do the same thing: pan, tilt, and roll. That
is cool. So you can kind of mimic the action in the feel of handheld, but way up in the sky when it's hanging off a crane. That's pretty cool. I've never heard of something like that.
I think I sent Connor a picture of it, but
great. Well, if you did, and I mean I'm sure you did, I'll point it out to him because I'll point it out to him. So we'll put that in the show notes so you guys can check it out. That sounds really cool.
The best part about that was he'd be sitting on a drum throne, and he'd be like this. The set is over there, but he's pointing this way because there was no real relative. So people be ducking out of the way when he'd pan over here.
I love that.
Like he's holding the camera. You have to go, oh, geez, you know. It was,
but there's like no lens on it. It looks like a camera, but there's no lens on it. The lens is up in the air or somewhere else.
Yeah, but that was funny to get used to that. Mitch is like pointing at everybody and going, what is he?
So between Mitch roaming around what appears to be aimlessly, just all over the place, we've got dancers running in your face. I mean, how do you not get hit in the head with a high heel or something on this shoot?
Yeah,
God.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Let's take a quick break and talk about MZ empowering filmmakers. Now, you want to think about MZ as the Netflix of filmmaking education, and that's because when you become an MZ Pro member, you have access to the entire array of quality education for filmmakers right there. It's high quality, it's video-based, and it covers all sorts of things like directing, cinematography, post-production, visual storytelling, and more. There are hundreds of hours of high-quality video-based filmmaking education, and it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ. Now, they've got all sorts of courses in all of those topics, but a couple I want to mention right here. One is the Indie Film Blueprint, which is basically a roadmap for how to plan, shoot, and sell your first indie feature. So that is great information. And of course, there's information there on editing with DaVinci Resolve. Now, those of you guys that have been listening, you know I'm a Final Cut Pro editor. However, I take a look at DaVinci Resolve every once in a while. People seem to be dabbling in that a little bit more, and that's certainly something that I want to learn more about. So it's there, as well as the art and technique of film editing taught by none other than Tom Cross, the editor of La La Land, Whiplash, and No Time to Die, and so much more too. So we're talking about great content taught by educators at the top of their game. And it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ. And yes, you can buy individual courses. Even though I recommend becoming an MZ Pro member, because then you have access to it all. But you can buy individual courses. But whatever you buy, you can get 20% off by using the promo code GCS20 at checkout, GCS20. So it's all there at gocreativeshow.com/MZ, MZED, empowering filmmakers. I want to talk about the relationship between camera operators and their DPs, because it's amazing how many times, we'll be talking to people that are listening to the show, and they'll say like, oh, I had no idea that DPs most of the time don't operate their own cameras. It's kind of like a sort of a new thing for people that haven't done large-scale films or even large-scale projects. It's so often, especially in kind of like corporate videos, smaller stuff, even music videos sometimes, commercial work, that the DPs also operate. So in a film like this, obviously, you have operators like yourselves, but then you also have the DP kind of watching the screen and giving you direction. And I'd love to talk to you about the relationship between you guys, because it seems like that needs to be just as tight as a director and their cast. Mitch, we'll start with you. Can you sort of describe that relationship between operators and DPs?
I've done 18 films with Steven, but I've probably done 20, 21 films with Janusz. But I will say that on a Spielberg film, that as a camera operator, I tend to work closer with the director than I do with Janusz. Janusz is occupied with the lighting, which is always difficult on a Steven project because we're looking, 180 degrees plus almost every shot. So he has his hands full. And I think it's helpful for him that I take care of the camera end of things with Steven. And obviously he needs to know what the shot is and what we're doing. But a lot of the communication happens between me and Steven. Now that's this relationship. It's different on other films,
But is it common for the camera operators and the directors to have a really close connection like that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'll say this to your listeners, but I have always felt like a camera operator, and probably a lot of people might not be happy when I say this, but I think camera operating job should have been a DGA job, to be honest with you. I mean, most of my work, I'm collaborating with the director. And we're telling stories. It's all visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's the director's, prerogative. Especially if it's a visual director who really knows the camera, for sure, I'm working by him a lot. Sometimes the directors are more oriented towards the acting or the writing or other elements of filmmaking. And then in that case, I'll be working with the cinematographer and we'll be figuring out how to shoot a scene.
Do you have the same experience, Buzz?
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely, it depends on who you're working with in a relationship you have with the people you've been hired by or are currently working with. So it almost, I've been in situations where the DP will walk in and say, okay, where are you guys pointing? And then because I've worked out something with the director and the marks have been made, and then the DP might say, can we not do that until the sun comes around to here? Because they have to protect the visual look of the film. So that it does very much depend upon who you're working with. If it's a writer director, sometimes they don't have their visual language through the camera is not as
sophisticated.
As sophisticated as maybe the director of photography and the operator. Then as an operator, kind of being the go-between to offer suggestions if that's allowed or respected. The collaborative part of it is very much why I like to do it, having collaboration between all departments. But it does depend upon the situation, who's kind of running it.
Have you worked, Buzz, with Spielberg before?
I did the post. So this is West Side Story was the second time around. The post was a lot of steadicam in that, a lot, and it was a culmination of, at that point, 28 years of a long career, having done all of the shots. Certainly, that were asking me, but the length, duration, and precision of the shots, not so much. It's it's a demanding thing to be, steering the horse when you're, when Steven takes that finder and says, we start here, and then, 4 and 8 pages later, you end up over here, which Mitch is very familiar with. But it is quite an experience, and it's quite a test of your merit and your skill set for sure, and your integrity. But ultimately, it really is rewarding to see it all come together and know you're a part of it. So, yeah.
I can imagine just the precision alone, the amount that rests on the camera operators is pretty staggering when you think. I mean, you kind of are like the last link in the chain of what is going to be successful or not. Like if the talent doesn't hit their marks, you get them. But on the camera side, it's you. Like you've got to hit your mark. You got to be there ready to go. You never want it to be your problem that you can't have a take.
Even if the actors don't hit their marks, it's still our fault.
Exactly. I always say, yeah, if the Mona Lisa had sat 3 feet to the left, she wouldn't have been in the frame. So hit your marks. But anyway, yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. We are performers just like the actors are. I've done, so many films with Stephen where the camera is basically another character in the film. And we have to perform when Stephen or any director says action, it's not a technical response. I mean, we are performing, and we don't get to make mistakes, though. We can't drop a line or forget, miss a mark or forget our line or something. We're expected to always be there. And I understand that, because what actors put into their performances, the difficulty of the emotional content of what they're doing, I get it. I understand it. And a performance could be a one-take thing. And if you're not on it, if you're not doing your job, that performance can be wasted, which would be tragic, So we put that on our shoulders to do that.
I know it's been a couple of years since you shot West Side Story, but if you think back, can you reflect on the most challenging scene of the film? Or maybe is there one that you look back and when you're watching it, you're like, I can't believe that got done?
I'd say the first time I saw the movie, I said that all the time. Every scene, I said, holy, how did we do that? I can't believe that we accomplished that shot successfully, because it really all looks really difficult and hard to me. And I look at it and I can't believe that we were successful.
Yeah, so the one for me for sure was the one when Maria gets up out of bed and shot starts. It comes off the window and it goes through the footboard, and her head is in this little circle on the footboard. Now with Steadicam, you can tell it's a Steadicam shot if you start pushing that parallax starts changing and the eyes start changing in that. So that starting that shot was brutal, because I was in a very awkward position. Then she kind of raises her head, I have to boom down just the slightest bit without being obvious, and then she gets up, stands up, and then I take her to the window. I go over to a mirror. She goes back across the room. She goes back over another mirror. I push in. I get out an apple box, come up over the bed. She gets to the bed, and that was a killer. I hands down was the one where that was the pucker shot right there, making sure.
But you know what? For your listeners, when they see that shot, it's when she's getting ready to go to the party, correct?
It's after. It's after. Yeah, it's actually after, when she hasn't taken her dress off.
She just got home. The point I'm making is that your listeners, when they see that scene, they won't even think about the sweat that Buzz went to do that shot. It was really difficult. I remember. Yeah,
and they shouldn't. And and they should. That's not our job. Is to not be there. We are there, and with Stephen, the camera is very much a part of the story, but it's still representing where the eye needs to be taken and what is the important part of the shot and what has led to other things and led to other shots. It's just this master craftsman of building, all the ingredients to make the cake, and it's to see it all together and to think back about all the parts that were gone together. The Officer Krupke scene, just the mix between handheld, jib arm, and Steadicam. It is masterfully done, and the performances are so on point. It was just inspiring to be around that.
I look at the Officer Krupke scene, and again, I remember that scene in the original movie, and it wasn't that inspiring, but it's so dynamic in this movie. And when I watched it, I said, "Jesus, how did we do that, Buzz?" I mean, the camera is whipping around and moving around and following pieces of paper, and it was intense.
At one point, we rehearsed this little bit where they're throwing Baby John back and forth, and Stephen's standing next to me, and he's going, "Okay, then we go over here, right?" And then you go, right, you go back that way, yep. Okay, then you go back this way, and then he comes towards you, then you go back over there, and then it's the wide shot. And I'm standing there, and Steve turns to me and says, "Oh, you got all that right?" I said, "No." He goes, "Well, screw it, let's just shoot it angeanyway." So we did it, and it just, I was kind of on it again, having that dance thing, seeing the head turning, I've got to, oh geez, whip, Anyway, yeah, it was fun.
Is there something about the way that you approach Steadicam shots that, like, is there something you try to avoid when you're doing a Steadicam shot? Like, is there like a trope of Steadicam operating that you try to avoid, or something that you'll, like, for instance, when we were talking to the director of photography for Mrs. Maisel, and a similar subject came up, and he had mentioned something, and this isn't a direct quote, but he mentioned something about, like, I never want people to know that it's a crane, or I never want people to know that it's a Steadicam. I just want it to feel like we're in the scene. And I was thinking about that leading into this interview, because I'm curious, is there something that you do, if you employ that, and if you agree with that thought, is there something that you do as a Steadicam operator to avoid the feeling of knowing it's a Steadicam? Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Can I answer that question?
Yeah, sure.
A good Steadicam operator is good. And, you can, as a non-Steadicam operator, one of the last traditional camera operators, it's a dead giveaway when the horizon starts floating. And a good Steadicam operator, immediately you see that they can do the shot without, anything floating around. In fact, there's some shots in West Side Story that I'm watching and say, did I do that or did Buzz do that? And that's how good Buzz is, that I could be on a dolly and maybe it was actually Buzz that did the shot. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Buzz. I just wanted to.
No, so the horizon for you, is it the same for you? But is it that horizon is kind of the giveaway?
Yeah, definitely that is a giveaway. And now with all the horizon augmentation devices that are out there, some of the horizons are absolutely fantastic, but the operating is terrible. So you have to. There's a balance there where you can't know how to play the violin without going through the start to finish. If all of a sudden you're like, oh, we can play the violin, but you didn't learn how to get through all the parts. Yes, certainly this yaw is that's one thing I don't like, and I try to be more point to point. I try to think more as a dolly. So instead of looping somewhere where there's weird parallax, if you go straight and use the pan to your advantage and delay when you're going to commit to a position. I know I'm getting very detailed and deep here.
No, this is good. I love it.
But if I try to think more straight lines and panning. So you're not kind of bending or panning at the same time. And headroom is also a thing. I don't like to sometimes correct for headroom when someone is deep. I'll let them walk into the headroom, where a lot of times you'll see someone be low, they walk in and then they're correcting for the headroom. Mm-hmm. But I like to have that headroom compress on the way in. Some of these things, that bothers me when that happens, when there's little corrections. And also allowing the frame to be played. Because the Steadicam is so nimble and these little shifts and these pans and stuff, when you're moving, it is a distraction. It just let the actors do their thing. If they're pushing the frame, have some guts to hold it and say, I'm just going to hold this, and hopefully they do. If not, okay, you messed up. But once you start to learn the actors and where they're standing, this is also the same just for operating as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's one thing, again for your listeners to know how to, what we say, fly a Steadicam, how to physically use it, but it's a completely other thing to know how to be an operator, how to be a good camera operator with the tool of a Steadicam, because it's just a tool. So all those things that Buzz just explained and talked about, those are the same things as a camera operator on a dolly or a crane. It's the same thing. Let the actors play the frame. Don't make a lot of little adjustments. How you play headroom, when someone's, it's just, there's so many things that goes into these intuitive, instinctual responses as a camera operator that are sort of hard to really describe until you get behind the lens. But those, I don't know if they're techniques, but what are the skill set of a cam operator, on a crane is the same that a Steadicam operator has to have.
I think Steadicam operators have had the great benefit of gimbals becoming so inexpensive, because now hundreds of thousands of people around the globe can try to create a nice looking gimbal shot and realize it's way harder than you think. And so you're sort of getting the benefits of the challenges of shooting Steadicam and gimbal work now, because so many people have the opportunity to do it poorly. They can buy one for a couple $100 and realize that it's not that easy.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It takes years. I mean, again, if you associate to the violin, you go to a class and you squeak out "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and you say, "Okay, go play with a philharmonic." Well, I don't know what I'm doing, So it's kind of the same thing. It takes a lot of years to build it, and to also just to get the life experience, and seeing your work over and over again, and also your peers' work, and try to compare and contrast. And it's a lifelong endeavor. And
Yes,
I am happy to do it until my life is no longer long. So I'm good. Yeah.
No, but it's true. It's true. Also, being on the, a camera, not doing it is a lifelong endeavor. I mean, every show has different challenges and different ways you use the camera. So it's not something that you learn and you put the book down and you do it. You're always learning.
Yeah. I want to talk about creative freedom as a camera operator. You don't have the credit of director of photography. You're doing very different things. Do you still feel like there's creative freedom for West Side Story as operators, but also just in general? Does the role of a camera operator lend itself to having creative freedom in maybe the way that people perceive directors of photography having? And Mitch, we'll start with you.
Yes, is the answer. A big resounding yes. No matter how specific, a director or a cinematographer might be, they'll give you, okay, Mitch, you start here. This is your start frame. And then this is your end frame. So even with that, which might be the most restrictive information you might get, between A and B, it's all you. It's all the camera operator. You're making decisions, 24 frames a second. You're having to make a choice of where to put the frame. And also, I would say that, especially with Steven, he'll explain what the shot he wants, and then he walks away. And it's up to us as camera operators to figure out how to execute those shots, what tools to use, what personnel to use. That's actually, can be the hardest part of the shot, is figuring out what's the most elegant way to execute this shot. But yes, there is a lot of, like I said, camera operating is an instinctive, intuitive process, and no one can tell you how to do that. And if you're thinking about what they're thinking, you're thinking, they're thinking at Video Village, let's say, you're going to be dead. You have to be completely alone and focused in the frame, and it's only you.
Do you feel the same, Buzz?
Yeah, even it's just a simple thing in a dialogue between two people. If you're operating a shot between two people, and the actor's doing this, and they're kind of doing this, and they're looking up, and they're coming back down like that. Well, you can let that go, all right? Because editorially, if someone's talking to you and their head's down like that, they're going to cut back to their head coming up. And if you're always correcting for this, it's going to become distracting, right? So just let it go. I mean, if you're always, my headroom, I got to keep the headroom, but then if you're cutting back and forth, you're going to get seasick. So, as an operator, a lot of creativity comes from knowing the edit and knowing when the cut's going to happen, or at least having an idea what the cut's going to happen, and knowing you're not forcing a cut for the editor. You're not saying, if someone's leaving frame and you keep panning and panning, panning, the editor's like, you did, so you kind of get wrapped up in the story, and you are not being the editor, but at least you're allowing the editor to make the choice and not forcing the cut. So, thinking as simply as it's two people talking. That's just one example. And that's your choice, because you can do that and people might not even notice it, directors or whatever, but you're making that call. emotionally, because you're making the audience work, because now the audience is looking up and down in the frame because they're following the eyes. So if you're tilting, they're not. It's not moving. Their eyes don't move. So you can think of it that way too.
Now, I was told by our producer, Connor, to ask you specifically about during tonight, the number tonight, an 18K tracking shot uphill for a half a block. Tell me about this story. I'm actually surprised because I have it's underlined, it's bolded. I'm like, we've got to talk about this. I'm surprised that it hasn't been brought up yet. What is this? What is this moment we're talking about here? The 18K and a tracking shot uphill for half a block following Maria and blocked by her head. I know the scene, but what is the story behind it?
It was an effect that they wanted the sunset behind her head. And, if you're walking back with the Steadicam in low mode up a hill, slowly booming up with someone's head, Rachel has to walk completely straight, because if we get parallax and the light goes, obviously they can paint it out. But that one was, I never was happy with that. Steven was happy with it after the last two for performance, but that was one of those takes I just was never happy with, because I felt that I failed the shot. And I will go to my grave thinking I failed that shot, because I could always have done better, because I was just this little slightest bit of parallax. I finally got to the point where I was following her lean, where I could kind of make that adjustment as we're going, and you don't notice it, except the stupid truck in the side of the thing. You see the truck kind of doing this, and that bothers the heck out of me. So I have to wait 20 years from now. I wake up on the couch and I see that shot. I'm like, I can't believe I screwed that up. But anyway, that was a tough one, because I had to start low and then boom up to the point where now, the camera's up here, and poor Rachel is literally a foot from me, and I can hear her voice just right there screaming in front of me. It was really incredible. That was also a tough one too. But I think I failed the system on that. No one will notice it. It's just one of those things that you'll be.
That's going to bother you.
Yeah, but for me, because that's what we do. That's Mitch and I. That's what we do. We strive for perfection all the time. And when those little things happen, you go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they use that."
Is there a shot that bothers you, Mitch? That something you just I wish we did one more take. There's got to be something.
Yeah, there's actually, I mentioned the thing about cutting off the feet, but I believe it's in the finale of the America number, where I do cut Ariana's feet just a little bit, and I know, and I even think we did another take because of that, but Steven chose to use that take because of obviously the performance. But I see it and I say, oh, I committed the cardinal sin right there, and it's on the big screen. Yeah,
shooting anamorphic, you can't do this because you're exposing the entire. You can't shift. You're locked. That headroom is headroom, and that footroom is footroom.
Yeah, there's no more room on the negative to change.
You mess it up. That's what it is. Yeah.
But I would say one thing that I've learned as an operator is that there, as much as we strive, and we do strive for perfection, there really, I can say in my career, which has been a long career, I don't know if I've ever done a perfect shot. There's always something I could do better. There's always something that will make the shot better for me, but it doesn't mean that it makes it better for the film. It doesn't mean that, it's, obviously that might have been a great performance for the actors. We don't want to compromise that. The schedule, the timing of saying, I need another take means that there'll be one less take for the director, at the end of the day. So you always have to evaluate. I call it sort of the art of compromise, and evaluate when that lack of perfection is a burden more than anything. Pursuit of perfection.
That pursuit of perfection can get in the way. There is a saying. I wish it was at the top of my mind. There is some sort of a saying about perfection getting in the way of something else. I can't remember what the exact saying is, but if I had it, I would say it and it would sound amazing, but I don't have it, so I'm just going to leave it there.
Well, you could look it up.
Perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, our time is winding down, and I just want to end with one more question, and just ask for advice for young filmmakers. There's a lot of them listening to the show. They want to get into the industry. They want to be operators. And we'll start with you, Buzz. What do you have any advice for the young filmmaker today of something they can do to try to get into this industry? How do you start? to, become a camera operator?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I would say just what I like to, if I'm telling a high school student, I would say get a still camera, okay? And you can shoot a scene doing multiple shots on a still camera. And try and tell a story without moving a camera, but putting a series of still images together. Okay, what that will do is it'll lend your eye to knowing a frame, and also not just do try to mask it at a 185 format or some sort of wider format, so that you can see the difference of the options of that choice. Practice. I mean, just practice framing and see what you get emotionally out of multiple still frames. That's a great start to just wrap your head around, what a frame is, what a nice frame is, and show people and say, like, does this speak to you? So then you're getting peer response back from that. So it's inexpensive, it's easy, and it builds your language of telling a story without moving a camera, just by presenting an image, and see what that emotional response comes back. That's
a cool idea. I like the idea of using stills and sort of limiting yourself to just a few frames to tell that story. Mitch, same question. Any advice for our younger filmmakers?
First of all, I would say that aspiring to be a camera operator is a great aspiration. I and it's not just because I am one, but I think being a camera operator is the most fun job on the set. With hands down, it's really a fun job. And so, a lot of people aspire to be camera operators. So it's tough to get that job. And, Buzz's advice is really good advice. But, what's hard is, how do you get that first job? How do you get that break? And I would say this as advice is that you can be very proficient as a camera operator, whether it's steadicam or on a dolly or a crane. You need to understand how to use the wheels. That's very important. But I think the critical aspect of being a camera operator is being able to do your job and to be a nice person. It's so important that we all are working very hard, 12, 14 hours a day, and sometimes adverse conditions, that you have to be a good human being. You have to get along with the people that you're standing next to 12 hours a day. And that's I think the key to being successful, is being good at what you do, but also being a good person in how you do it.
I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much. The film is West Side Story. It's out in theaters now, and it's awesome. So you certainly do need to check it out if you haven't already. John Buzz Moyer and Mitch Dubin, thank you guys both so much for being on the show. Where can people find you online? Do you guys have Instagrams out there, Buzz?
I do not have an Instagram.
No, look at you.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, and see if I get back to you. See what happens.
I'm on Instagram. I think I'm at Mitch Dubin. It's pretty simple, but
and we'll put links to all of that in the show notes so you guys can check it out and follow Mitch. But you can't follow Buzz because he's keeping all of his trade secrets secret. He's zipping them up.
And I would say also, I don't say this all the time, but West Side Story is a movie that really you should see on a big screen. And I know, in COVID times, that's a scary thought. And so my suggestion is go see a matinee when it's not so crowded. But really, it's so beautiful on a big screen.
That's the way I see, like, all the films for a Go Creative show. If we don't get screeners for it, I always go in the afternoon. It's the best. You can get the whole run of the place. You can sit wherever you want. It's just, I like the experience of being in basically like an empty theater. I know that's not the goal. You certainly want the theaters to be full, but when you get those chances, take them. They're great. Anyway, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back for your next project. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
See ya.
All right, I want to thank John Buzz Moyer and Mitch Dubin for coming on the show to talk to us all about West Side Story. The movie's awesome, so I know you guys are going to love it. But please let us know what you think in the comments. If you have any questions that you'd like for us to ask them that we didn't come across on this episode, please let us know, and we'll make sure that they answer in some way, shape, or form. I also want to thank our producer, Connor Crosby, for putting this whole thing together, Dave Siegel for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find him at siegelsound.com. I also want to have you guys follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and your favorite podcast app. Click subscribe so you never miss an episode. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram at Ben Consoli, BenConsoli. I post all of my behind the scenes, the work that I'm doing with Go Creative Show, as well as my production company, BC Media Productions. Tons of fun stuff there. And I know you guys are going to love it. So check it out, BenConsoli. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next week on another episode of the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.